segueing from there to Aussie Motorsport, boys, Bathurst, Tom, mate.
Mm.
I was sold. Like Joe said, Tom's coming on the pod. He's a supercars nut. We want to get his opinion. So, what did
Uh,
you think of the race yesterday, mate? If
well,
you haven't watched it, which I don't know how you wouldn't have. Red Bull and SVG and Garth Tander got the win. Chaz Mostert and Fabian Coulthard were second, and Cam Waters and who was Cam Waters' co-driver?
James Moffat. Moffat.
James Moffat came third in a pretty epic race. So yeah, started off in the wet, and there were some pretty crazy crashes at the start. But Tom, mate, what did you think?
Well, it was the best Bathurst probably since I'd say 2014.
Wow.
Um,
Really?
in, in terms of
That's a big call.
entertainment, yeah. Well, I mean, like I'm putting it ahead of McLaughlin's fiasco win as well, because like it's just in terms of conditions, safety cars, the racing itself. It had everything. If anything, I'm going to be a bit greedy and say I was disappointed that there wasn't more rain in the middle of the race. Like I was sitting there with the amp and I'm saying, I was literally rubbing my hands together, so excited. And I think it got to like lap 20. It was raining on one corner and then the next corner was all dry. Like, what's going on? But the track conditions, like off the track, was causing enough carnage as it was. So it was a great race, very enjoyable one. But yeah, I think if there's one word to sum it up, it's just patience and consistency. Really, two words. Like what when I think it was about lap 50, and you're looking at all the cars and you're saying to yourself, who hasn't had an incident? You're just looking at Tander and SVG, and you're like, these guys are a smoky. They're just gonna find their way to the front, and that's what they did.
I think it was a really interesting race yesterday for more reasons than normal. One thing I noticed yesterday that was apparent from the start was that the cars were like, we knew this in practice and qualifying as well, because I don't think no car really had more than one session that they topped over the whole weekend. And cars couldn't overtake coming down the chase. Like there was all the cars that were in the lead. You had Waters' car, Chaz's car, SVG's car, and the Boost Mobile Baraboost Commodore. And then even at some stages, the Dick Johnson cars.
They were shocking.
They were shocking once it dried up. They were nowhere. But like when you watch them driving sort of, in line, none of the cars really could pull a move on each other. And there was a few parts where at the start of the race, Chaz's 25 car was really good coming down the mountain, going back up, but really had no aero for the top of the mountain. And then I think they sort of tuned some aero into it through the pit stops, and it was totally flipped. Brody Kostecki's car was superior over the top of the mountain. He would just pull a massive gap, and then he'd just be able to ride out the cars chasing him down the mountain and back up.
The Tickford was rapid too.
The Tickford was the fastest car at the start of its stint on the fresh tyres, but would burn the tyres quickest out of all of them, it seemed. And SVG's car seemed to be really good up and down the mountain at the end of the race. So like there was a lot of chess going on and not many overtakes. But in terms of seeing, four of the best teams and probably three of the most consistent drivers this year at the front of the race, I thought that was a great race of sort of cat and mouse, teams trying things, and track position at the end of the day reigned supreme because no one could pass. So the pit stop strategy that the 97 car sort of, you don't luck into it, but when the chips fall a certain way and you maximize it, get the track position, that can win races, and it got them to the front, and that's what won them the race.
That stint after the last safety car where it was Cam, SVG, and Chaz, that was epic. That's the advertisement right there for supercars.
There was no room left on that track for either of those two guys. Like even when they're coming out of the Forest Elbow, I was cringing every time that they would ramp out because they were getting so close to the wall. They were getting so close, like they were getting so high up the curves around McPhillamy, and even the way they were taking the curve at the end of the chase and then out of Hell Corner as well. Like it was a perfect advertisement of two of probably I would say on the, like, especially with Chaz on his day, the two best drivers in the championship going as hard as they could for as long as they could. And it was, the best thing was that SVG looked like he sort of broke Chaz at the start of the stint. And I thought, oh, here we go. But then Chaz came back and then they were just trading sectors after sector. It was an awesome display of racecraft.
And Chaz did like 60 laps in one go. Like,
yeah, he went hard.
He went and he was going to the end, and that's what I thought was, like, everyone else had shorter stints at that end of the race, but he was just beast.
It just shows how important having a good co-driver is. If you look at Tanda and SVG in the middle part of the race, they were pretty much doing identical times. So you had Chaz and Cam having to do the triple stint at the end, and you had a rested SVG doing the double stint. So, like, I'm not saying Fabian isn't a good co-driver. He's probably second tier. But, like, you compare him to Garth, and it's just chalk and cheese. And it just takes so much pressure off.
A massive difference from last year was that last year, Holdsworth and Chaz could literally overtake at will. Their car was so much better tuned than everyone. But I think this year they really struggled. They were struggling to make any overtake that they could. So all their overtakes came down to strategy. There was one thanks to the repair vehicle coming up the hill. That was a bit of a farcical as well.
But he had him already. He would have had him there.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, but
he was already passed.
So a lot of it came to strategy. But I've written a few notes that I wanted to sort of bring up to you guys, and I think we've touched on the first one, was how good Kostecki looked through this race. He's had an up and down season, but like I think this year he's really coming into his own at Erebus. But he looked like a total pro yesterday. His car didn't seem the fastest. He was making it wide. He was getting his elbows out. I think he was a bit unfortunate with his contact with James Moffat, because I think it was more Moffat's fault as well, because he was quite far up the car. But he honestly looked sublime. I wanted to know what you guys thought of him, because I think we always give Will Brown a bit of a rap, but I wanted to give him a rap because he looked awesome this week.
Well, put it this way, I'm jealous watching him race, because I'm looking at the current predicament that DJR's in, and everyone raves about Anton. I was talking about Ant yesterday. As good as he is and as improved as he is, he's not an 11th driver. You look at Gears, you look at Moffat, you look at Cam. These guys can drive in the limit, and they can always perform. DJR have a more consistent car than Chaz and Cam, but if you put Chaz or Cam in that Dick Johnson car, they're challenging SVG every race. You look at Anton, he's either making mistakes, he's not qualifying well enough. And on the flip side, you got Davison, who's Mr. Consistent, but he doesn't have that pace. So when you look at someone like Brody and just the way he drives, like Bathurst is the ultimate test for a supercar driver, and he's out there, like he's almost like Greg Murphy. Not always in the best car, but he'll always give it 110%. Like he was sliding around the top of the mountain like crazy yesterday. So if you put him in a consistent car and just let him fine tune himself a bit more, give him a couple of years, he'll be right up there.
Yeah, I agree. I thought he performed amazingly yesterday. Like, I think it was throughout various stages of the race. It was Cam behind him. It was Chaz. It was Coulthard. Like,
no one could overtake him.
They just couldn't get past him.
He was so dogged, and he was defending like an absolute animal, and it was frustrating me as like hell, because I wanted Chaz to get past him. But you have to admire and give props to racing like that, because that's what you want to see. I want to give a shout out as well to not young anymore, Richie Stanaway. I thought he, especially in qualifying, first time back in a supercar in 3 years, reminded us what kind of talent this kid has. And, he's always been the best when he was humble. When he sort of got to his head a bit, he sort of lost his way. but I think we saw the absolute best of Richie Stanaway in the ranks. He's a rain demon. To come into a supercar at Bathurst as your first race, miss an hour of practice over the weekend because your car's got gremlins, jump in a wet qualifying, qualify fourth. You didn't do a shootout, but that is so understated how hard that is. You know what I mean? Like, we're talking about drivers like SVG, Cam, Whincup, Lowndes. That's just to name a few. Even Anton, Will Davidson. These guys Will Davidson's run 2 Bathurst. To best them all in those treacherous conditions. Absolute stellar qualifying. I would not be surprised if he had a better co-driving seat next year, which could lead to another seat back in supercars, because to perform on the biggest stage and to, even in the race, he looked so composed. He didn't look like he was a world beater, but I wouldn't have expected him to, but he just looked really solid. Like, I think it was him, Jimmy Golding.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I was impressed by Golding.
Looked really good as well. And I think, and Bryce Forward, they were my 3 sort of mid-tier races that I was really happy to see perform well, and did a great job, kept it out of the wall. What did you guys think of their performances?
Well, I'll go one step further. Oh, sorry, go Harry.
No, you go, mate.
I'll go one step further and throw Holdsworth into that mix. Yeah, he's a seasoned veteran.
And Holdsworth.
And he had a rookie co-driver with him, and I think they, like that bunch that you just mentioned, Stanaway, Golding, Ford, it was just consistent. Like, not the fastest cars, but when everyone was going nuts, those guys just kept it calm, and they reaped the rewards later on in the race. Like, you had people going off, mud in their filtration systems and everything, and they kept their cars clean and out of the trouble, and they finished what I think Stanley was 11th, Golden was 12th, and Ford was 13th or something. I think they all finished.
I think it was 8th or 9th.
Oh yeah, well they all, and Holdsworth was 6th. So it just showed that yesterday, just keeping a calm head was the best. Like, it's easier said than done, but they did a very good job of it.
Yeah. What did you think of Holden leaving the Mountain H? Victorious one more time, with as well two of their, their 2 factory teams over their history, going for it at the end of that race. I thought it was a bit poetic.
Yeah, it was. It's sad because I'm like you. I've been a Holden fan my whole life, and yeah, it's just a part of, like, even my mum, who knows nothing about motorsport, said to me yesterday, why are they leaving? This is crap. Like, Holden versus Ford is like, it's the biggest thing. It's like, Mum, they don't make them anymore. But
yeah,
like, it's just one of those things that transcends, I guess, motorsport. It's, everyone knows Holden versus Ford, Bathurst. So I'm glad Holden got the W. Yeah, my team, which sucks, is moving over to Ford, so don't know how that's going to go next year. But yeah, look, fitting end to the history of Holden, I think.
I think it was. I thought they were the 2 best. Realistically, I don't think it's a stretch to say that they were the 2 best cars on the weekend. When you put all the conditions into play, and even just look at the tyre life problem that Tickford had this weekend, and all that's been their Achilles heel throughout the whole year, that they just can't keep the tyres, keep the life in the tyres, which I felt sorry for Cam for, because he looks, Cam looks so good at Bathurst every year, and it's always either Chaz taking him out or, some unfortunate gremlin that seems to get him to finish second every year, or the last 2 years, but he's always there and thereabouts. One thing I wanted to say, I think it's a monster of a car. I think losers of the weekend, I wanted to say, number 1, top 10 shootout. I want to know why, if it's a top 10 shootout when there's only 1 car on the track, we can't have a top 10 shootout in those conditions. And I understand there's rivers on the track, but you don't have to drive fast through the rivers. You just got to drive as well as you can to the conditions. It's not like there's a chance of someone spearing into you because you stuff it up. Yeah, you can wreck your car, but like that's the chance you take in any top 10 shootout. Just drive within your means. I thought it would have been an interesting top 10 shootout if we saw them do it in those conditions. So I think that was a big loser of the weekend. And from the people I spoke to today as well, I think that was one of the main things that everyone was saying, like, yeah, we understand the safety precautions and all that kind of hoo-ha involved, but in a top 10 shootout, when the track is your own for that 2 minutes in history, I don't see why we can't do it in very wet conditions.
Or just move it forward. Like, you could have done it, like, it was raining all day Saturday, but you could have moved, like, everyone's got the BOM app. You can see when the rain's going to hit, move it forward, sacrifice 86 race or something. Like, it's not, people aren't going there to watch 86s, they're going there to watch supercars. So, like, and they've been talking about it for years. That happened like in a race on the Gold Coast, I think 2018. They knew the thunderstorm was going to hit and they had to abandon the race. And the drivers all said, if you know it's coming, just move the session to an earlier time slot.
I definitely agree with that. I don't know what the thinking is with those kind of things.
Is it TV? Like, I know we cancelled it and that affects TV, but moving the times, does that affect? Is it because of TV? I don't know.
You would rather have the race earlier and have your ads than have it not at all, I suppose. Especially when most of your money comes from Foxtel, which doesn't have ads. It's just one straight broadcast. What you have there shouldn't change much, especially now with even Channel 7 having 4 channels. They can easily jostle, mash for the 15th time that week coming on, on Channel 7 mate, whatever they're going to watch it on. So I don't understand that thinking. My other one was the ridiculous crashes at the start of that race, and I'm gonna say
the
first corner one, I'll put that down to drivers getting horny on the start of the race, hit a bit of grass and spin out of control. But that Zane Goddard one was scary.
Can I go into bat for Zane Goddard for a second here?
I want you to, so I do feel sorry for him, but
right.
Please.
So
I don't think he was being a dickhead.
I think,
if that's what you think.
No. There's a lot more to it involved. The track was in an appalling state. Off the track was even worse. From the team point of view, you've got some drivers there that have raced 100 rounds, 150 rounds. They raced in all conditions. James Courtney should have been in that car, and the rest of the main game drivers should have been in their cars. In those conditions, like Zach Best, starting in Randall's car, race was over on the first lap.
Randall was so pissed too when they interviewed him.
Yeah, and so you would. Goddard's out. James Courtney looked distraught. He's not making that dive bomb attempt on Greg Murphy on lap 2. Well, that's not happening. It ruined Reynolds' race. It ruined
Campbell's race.
Heimgartner's race. Randall's race. Deepest Squire's race was done pretty much from that first lap. Like, even though they got the car out straight away, there was still lingering damage. In those conditions, the teams have to say, best drivers in the car. These can, like, unless you're Triple Eight who's got Garth Tander, chuck him in. That doesn't affect anything because he's pretty much a main game driver anyway. But the team should have been putting their main game drivers in because it eradicates those first lap issues.
But here's my train of thought. Zane Goddard was a full-timer last year, right? And my question isn't the fact that don't put him in the car or do. I mean, I think most of those drivers on the grid can do a decent job at the start of a race. My question is, okay, so you'll come off at the chase. We understand that it happens. It's racing. It's then so you're coming across the grass. Your foot is still planted because you have to beat the dirt. Once you beat the dirt, you have to check up. you have to check up. We've seen that crash happen a few times, but never with that kind of,
Speed.
what is it, ice rink, because it's so wet, and even if you get bogged, the rules change this week. So if you go one lap down when there's a safety car, they will shoot you past anyway. Like we saw Brown say it at the start of the race. Yeah, went in, had to fix the tyre rod. They were back on the lead lap within like 25 laps or something, probably even less, might have been less. So there's a bit of naivety, which is definitely what I think. If you put someone like Courtney in the car or a main gamer, they would, weigh up that situation better.
I guess my issue is why make that dive bomb on lap 2 or whatever.
Well, yeah, that is
61 lap race.
That's the big question. But okay, you make the dive bomb, you fuck it up. These things happen, but then to come on to redress in such a wild manner, and then end the race, like pretty much the races of 4 cars. I thought, and thank God no one was seriously hurt, because like those cars were mangled. They were absolutely mangled.
Well, Dale Wood went up on 2 wheels. Like he almost went Lightning. He almost went Lightning McQueen on that
and if you,
concrete barrier.
If you see how hard Campbell's car gets hit into the wall, it was like proper whiplash,
But not even when he hits Goddard, like the impact was ridiculous.
But then even the impact behind, I think Winterbottom's car gets spun by
he got spun by
D'Alberto or something. Yeah,
went to the left and then realised
the whole circus of stuff that happened after that. Like I understand, everyone's getting racy and stuff, but then even like Alex Davidson finds the wall down there as well. There were so many like cars coming off like 6 safety cars in like 24 laps or something ridiculous.
Crazy thing was though with and this is where I think Goddard's case is softened a bit, because you see Davison come off, he's fully locked and that car smashes into the tyres. With Goddard, he's skating through it. And I think when he hits the mud before Ransman track, it flicks him, because that's a very unnatural angle to be rejoining on. Yes, I think like it's easy to say, just turn it into the tyre barrier, you won't, but you never know what's going to happen to the car. At the same time, yes, he did stuff up, but at the same time, I don't think it's as much his fault as it was down to his driving as it was to the conditions, because he just skated straight through it.
Well, they gave him a hefty fine today, which I was also a bit surprised with. 10K.
10 grand fine.
Big 10G fine.
He's only 21. That's like fining me 10 grand.
And then my last loser of the weekend was, I think, for Dick Johnson Racing's 1,000th race, and for them to finally change their livery after 4 years, and have such a delicious livery. It looked phenomenal. To have all that happen, it was such a.
Because you couldn't see it.
It was covered in mud.
Yeah.
I was hoping for it to rain just to wash it off. Yeah, I thought that was a race to forget, and even the bigger repercussions for that as well is that I think it was Davidson's 2nd and 3rd in the championship. Davidson's gone down to 5th. Anton's in 3rd.
He's
only
3rd.
5 points ahead of Chaz. Waters is now well clear of them both.
75.
I think it's like 25 maybe. But for the championship, that's a lot of cheddar they've lost in this weekend. And I think realistically, the Anton's car one probably wasn't their fault as much, but the Davidsons both had big incidents in that race that totaled that number 17 car.
Well, I think it's the epitome of DJR at the moment. Like the second best team, like they're ahead of Tickford, they're ahead of WAU, but they started the beginning of the season, they're on fire. Anton's had a bit of a lull in the second half, but every year it's the same story. Like they go to Bathurst, they're not going to be competing. like even the McLaughlin one, it took Fabian Coulthard sneaky to get McLaughlin over the line. So it's just, they go to the mountain every year. They're mediocre. They take subpar co-drivers and just, it's the same story every year.
Do you think they're subpar co-drivers?
I do.
One thing I do think that their co-driver lineup is definitely unambitious. Because when you see that, like even teams like Brad Jones Racing, Tickford's main cars, like all their drivers have been in a supercar competitively much more recently than Dick Johnson's team. But having said that, especially D'Alberto, I think he always performs at a really high level and doesn't usually make any cock-ups. Davidson, I have a little bit more reservation for, because I don't see him as much, and I just don't think he seems to look as close to the main drivers. But like you would think, like when you look at how quickly Triple Eight snap up the best supercar driver available at the time to fill up their seat, and now even Walkinshaw are doing it with Chaz's cars 2 years in a row. I don't know if it's a lack of ambition or just sitting in your comfort zone, but I think that is definitely something that can hurt them or is hurting them.
Well, the Alex Davison one was a bit of a last minute thing because they'll hang for McLaughlin, and McLaughlin was intending to come back, and they kind of just flicked the switch and said, I'm just going to focus on Indy. Look, D'Alberto has always been consistent, but he's never been a top tier co-driver. Even when he was a full-time racer, it was never anything too special.
But don't you think that a team like Dick Johnson Racing, the second Fabian doesn't have a race seat,
exactly.
He's trying to snap him up because he knows that team perfectly.
He knows the team exactly. Like it's,
you know what I mean? Like I feel like these are things that make or break, you know, your Bathurst run. Like we see it happen this year. Tander and Van Gisbergen win. Last year, Holdsworth and Mostert win. Even second, Fabian and Mostert. You know, Cam and Moffat hasn't been out of a car for that long. You know, like it always happens. Jamie and Lowndes, you know, we saw Lowndes and Stephen Richards, like guys just jumping out of cars and winning races. You can't substitute that confidence in the car.
Do you think next year with WAU going to Ford and being backed by the factory, it'll kind of they'll leap over DJR? Because they're quite strong at the moment. They haven't got the factory backing. So
my problem with Dick Johnson Racing next year, like the Mustang is built this year is built by them, you know. But next year they all have the same engines and they're all running off the same, you know, suspension, chassis. And I think if you look at WAU and Tickford in terms of Cam and Chaz, they always seem to maximize their strategy to a higher, like they're always going above what you would expect from them, the car and the driver. Whereas especially this year, and I feel it's a bit slack because Anton has had real good moments this year that he has looked really good, and Chaz has had moments this year that he's looked really shit. But I think that's car specific, car and track specific. You know, I just speak the truth. I speak it how it is. I mean, Cam's been the most consistent out of everyone other than SVG this year, and it's showing on the championship ladder now.
I don't think it's a driver's thing. I think it's a team thing. The only way Tickford and WAU eclipse DJR is if they get consistent over the course of the season. Because WAU will have an awesome race at like Adelaide at the beginning of the year, and then they'll just fall off a cliff.
But it is a very real thing that WAU, Chaz and Waters are going to finish ahead of both the Dick Johnson cars this year. And the question becomes, can Percat and Courtney, or whoever's in the main other Tickford car, do the same thing? That's definitely very important to the situation. What I'm saying is when you're like Tickford and Walkinshaw are playing catch up, and they have been playing catch up to the big two for the last 4 or 5 years. But what I'm saying is now with the infrastructure going so even, and we've seen teams like the strategies that Adam DeBore calls for Chaz, work really well most of the time. Same thing with Cam Waters' car. Are we going to see now that these teams eclipse Dick Johnson Racing as the bigger, as the better performing Ford teams? I don't know. I think it's going to be a really interesting thing, a problem for Ford Racing to having three, really competitive, cars in their stable, and that's why they've gone and picked up Walkinshaw as well. It makes total sense.
You're forgetting Erebus, because not Erebus,
Blanchard.
What's it called? Penrite. What's it called?
Yeah, but like Penrite,
even them.
Yeah, but realistically, they're not on that level yet. They're not on that level.
Not yet.
They could be. They definitely could be because they're spending the money. But like from what we're seeing now, like I don't know how it's going to shake up. I think it's a great problem for Ford Racing to have, to investing this money in it. I just want to know what you think.
Well,
being the resident DJR fan, it's not about hope. It's about what do you like. What would be your best guess? How would you think it goes compared to how would you like it to go?
I think next year, DJR will still have the jump on the rest of the Ford group.
Because they got the two good drivers.
Well, if Anton can just get more consistent, like if he can just keep his consistency for the whole season, I think he'll finish second. But I hope from a neutral, even just from a neutral point of view, Tickford and WA pick up their game, because otherwise it's going to be a runaway SVG championship again, because he's too good for this current crop. Unless Chaz and Cam are in cars that can actually challenge him, he's gonna win the first 10 races again. It's just going to be another romp to the title.
Here's one thing I do think. I think definitely next year, Triple Eight is going to be the best Chevy car.
100%.
I think 100%. That's going to be, as a total given. So the one thing that you'd want is that you still want the Ford teams to be sharing some data to help each other out to maximize their attack.
Can you see that?
But that's not going. No, I can't see that happening at all.
DJR, you have Ryan walking over to the garage. You'll have Tim Edwards walking, and you just have Ryan Story just giving the middle finger to him. I don't think that's going to happen at all.
Can I tell you something? Honestly, Thomas, between if we're measuring, apples and oranges, when I look at Dick Johnson's driver lineup, and I say Anton, I put Anton, Chaz, and Cam in the same group.
Out of that group, though, is the bottom of that group, though.
Yeah, Anton's the bottom. It goes Chaz, Cam, Anton, I think.
Raw pace, I'm going Cam ahead of Chaz, though. Chaz.
I beg to differ, but it's fine. I put them in that. I put them in a group together, right, under SVG. The thing that I want to say, that I'm interested to see next year, is if here's the weird thing. This year has been an anomaly for Percat, and I've been totally schooled because I was expecting big things this year, and he's shit on my face. So I want to see if he comes back next year. Well, but taking their careers in, as a whole, I would expect also Percat, Courtney, and Will Davidson to sort of be in a very similar bubble as well. So it's going to be a very interesting teams championship between those teams to see who can best each other. And I think it's going to be down to what co-driver or what second driver can, raise their level up. Because Will Davidson this year, I think, has been sublime. Most of the year he has anyway.
Well, his qualifying has been
really good.
Qualifying's been out of this world. It's just
he can't convert his starts.
Just converting his great positions.
Yeah.
No.
But
it's either he's had poles or front row.
I think we've got 2 more events left till the end of this year, 2 more events till the end of this era. We saw the new Mustang going around the mountain, and it looks phenomenal. It looks absolutely phenomenal. Like I'm a bit disappointed. I'm disappointed that Holden is no longer here. I'm disappointed that next year I'll be in. My team is going over to Ford, but with the look of that car, I feel a weight lifted off my shoulders. You know, I'm ready to bask in the glow of the blue oval. But yeah, two more
It
events,
looks hot.
two great events. We're going to the Goldie, and then we're finishing off on the streets of Adelaide. I can't think of two better events to, round out this season. Gentlemen, any last thoughts?
Yeah. Need to bring back the Enduro Cup.
Oh, sorry. Can we mention this? Yeah, I had this thought. Keep going.
Yeah, because
before we finish.
These co-drivers, they need a competitive
A
race
warm-up
before
lap.
Bathurst to get their iron, and then you honestly make it Sandown, Bathurst, and Adelaide. Don't even make it the Gold Coast. Make it a 500k race around Adelaide. Done.
We were saying last week they should make the Gold Coast a super night street race like Singapore's Grand Prix, which I think would be awesome.
That's not a bad idea.
But I definitely think we saw the repercussions of the co-drivers not having
match fitness.
Match fitness, but also just getting like the jitters out of the car. Even we saw like how badly Moffat launched the car off the start. Like stuff like this. Like if you have a weekend at Sandown was perfect. They actually gave him a co-driver's race. Get it out of your system. Have a practice start, 500k race, relatively simple trap.
It's also a prestigious race though as well. Like Sandown's one of the.
Well, I don't think they're bringing back the Sandown 500, but you definitely need. I think you need a pre-Bathurst co-driver race, even just for like the team getting. It's just more time for practicing pit stops, seat changes. Ironing out the kinks, getting your best car prepared for that Bathurst 1000. And then I don't think we would have seen all the early race shenanigans that we saw if it was the second race of an enduro series rather than the first race of a very quick sort of doesn't mean much 2-race enduro series or 2-event enduro series. So I had that exact thought. Thank you for reminding me, young man.
That's all right, mate.
All right.
That's me. That's all my thoughts.
Yep. Thomas, you got anything that you'd like to end us on?
Nah. Thanks for having me. It's been a joy.
Welcome back anytime, mate. We always have to sub one Bahaja for another.
That's right. If you need some proper supercars correspondence, you know where I am. So
that's good.
The phone's always.
All right. Well, thanks for jumping on, guys. Thanks for listening. As always, like, subscribe, click the link, all that kind of thing, whatever it is. YouTube seems to be getting a bit more traction at the moment, which is good to see. But yeah, thanks for listening, and we'll be back next week with
MotoGP.
Bit of MotoGP and potentially some other content. But yeah, thanks guys. Thanks for getting on.
Thanks, mate. Always a pleasure.